What's going on, everybody? I'm the Candy Man with my IG Fish Candy and my YouTube Fish Candy. And today I want to talk about diagnostics on my engine, on my boat. I have a 1975 uh, 188. It says it on the valve cover, but it's actually a 888. It's a Ford 302. And I want to go through some things that I found out that I want to share with you. Let's start with the diagnostic. So as you can see, the engine is right here. I have a lot of brand new components on this engine, and I actually started off backwards. I should have did the simple diagnostic test, and I'm going to tell you, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of videos that have the same symptoms that I had when I was diagnosing my engine. And one of them was a hard start. It was hard to start this engine. And mind you, that I had the original intake manifold, which came with the mercruiser, which is a 2-barrel carburetor, was a Rochester 2-barrel. And I just felt, it was old. It needed to be replaced. And if I was going to do that, I was going to spend the money and put a nice intake on here and put a 4-barrel carburetor on here, and everything should be good. I thought that was going to be the cure. Didn't fix none of the hard start. My boat bogged out every time I would throttle up. It would bog out. Sometimes it sped up and I would get speed, maybe about 30 miles an hour, and that was about it. So I thought maybe changing the carburetor and the intake was going to do that. That didn't fix it. So I thought, well, maybe it's the ignition. So I went out and bought a brand new distributor from a marine distributor. And mind you, this carburetor is Edelbrock's marine carburetor. You can tell by the green components here that are painted to protect from the rust. Bought a distributor that's a marine distributor. That didn't fix it, and I'm just thinking, still hard to start, still bogging out. I put it in gear, it would stall. So I bought an ignition coil. It was an Edelbrock ignition coil, and I'm thinking, well, that should fix it, because I watched another YouTube video where they replaced the coil, and he was having a hard time starting. He was bogging out, and it didn't fix anything. Still the same problem. So I thought maybe, you know what? Maybe it's the fuel pump. Went and bought a new fuel pump, marine fuel pump, for this 302, and put it on there. Still the same problem. Put a Edelbrock fuel pressure regulator with the Edelbrock. This is from Edelbrock, but it's Russell fuel gauge, and I piped it up with hard lines and a return line that I put, and it returns back into the water separator housing. Still nothing. Hard to start, very hard to start. And I'm thinking, maybe this is too much carburetor for the engine, and I was just getting frustrated. Still watching YouTube videos, and there was people having the same problem. And I watched this one video where the guy was talking about vacuum, and the best vacuum to have on there is between 18 and 21 inches of vacuum. And if you got that, your engine should be running good. So with this new intake manifold, there was a port back here that I can tap into, and I could hook up my gauge to it, started my engine, and I was only getting 13 inches of vacuum. That's an indication to me that there is something wrong with the engine itself and not the components that are outside it. So watching that, I was thinking, maybe there's a vacuum leak. Checked every single part of the intake manifold, and there was no vacuum leak, nothing whatsoever. And but I was still only getting 13 inches of vacuum. So I had to go a step further, and I'm like, well, if I'm only getting 13 inches of vacuum, there's no intake leak. What else could be creating low vacuum? Well, if the pistons aren't sucking in that air, which is, they call it vacuum, which is 14.7. I'm at sea level on the West Coast. So I'm at 14.7 pounds of air pushing down on me, is pushing down inside the carburetor. They're going into pistons. But you need to fill in that piston in the cylinder, and by that is the piston sucks in the air, which is the vacuum. It should be pretty high. And then when the valves close and you're going to top dead center on the piston, it should be at about 150 pounds of pressure pushing on that piston. The minimum, I believe, on these engines should be 100. They'll still run at 120, but that's still low. 130, 140 is getting better, but 150 should be a ideal for these engines. So I got my pressure gauge and check the pressure on the cylinder, and this is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Number 1, I was only getting 90 psi. Number 2, I was only getting 90 psi. Number 3, I was only getting 90 psi. Number 4 was 120 psi. That right there, out of all the cylinders, that cylinder was the highest one that I've got. So I come over to number 5. I don't know if that's number 5 or I gotta double check. But either way, we'll say this is number 5 for shits and giggles. Number 5, I was getting 60 psi. Number 6, I got 0. Number 7, I got 60 psi. And number 8, I got 0. So 0, 60, 0, 60. Well, that told me a lot about what's going on with this engine. Hard start. It's not getting no air in it. It's not sucking that air. It's coming from somewhere. The vacuum gauge and the compression tester told me a lot about what's going on with this engine. None of this, I don't think, really mattered, because I was going to have the same results. So I was even more curious about why. Was it the head gasket or was it the piston rings? So what I did is I went out to Harbor Freight and got this leak down tester for about 90 bucks. And I hooked it up and I checked the cylinders, and I noticed between number 6 and number 7, I put air top dead center. In order to test this, you got to make sure that that cylinder you're testing is top dead center. We can determine whether you got burnt valves, blown head gasket, or you're leaking air back into your engine through the bypass, through the blow-by of your pistons. The rings are bad. But when I hooked up to the 0, number 6, I was getting air blowing out of number 7 cylinder, because I put my finger there and I could feel air blowing out of it. So I already know that the head gasket was blowing on that, between those cylinders. So I checked the other cylinders and they're just not holding air, and there's got to be something else wrong with it on the engine side. So it's either the valves, head gasket, or the piston rings. which I'm gonna do all of it. I don't want to waste no time on it. I want to do everything. But after I do the long block on this, where I'm gonna change the pistons, the piston rings, and have the valves, a valve job done on the heads, a head rebuild. I think when I put this back together, I already have all the brand new stuff that's gonna make this an amazing engine. But I'm doing this video because they don't really specifically say what exactly wrong with your engine. I know exactly now what's wrong with my engine, and by chasing the coil and the distributor and the carburetor and the intake and the fuel pump, I spent a lot of money on that, which is good because now with the rebuilt engine that I'm going to put in here, it's going to run really good. But if you don't have the time or the finances to replace all this stuff, I'm just recommending to do the basics. Run the engine, do the vacuum check, do a compression test on the cylinders, and go from there. If everything looks good, if each cylinder is above 130, then I would say, you know, at least you got an engine that'll last a little bit longer. At least 130 on all of them. And then got good vacuum, but you're still stalling, then you can check these other components. But I went a little backwards. I know. I need to share this with you guys so that way you guys don't waste your money on parts that you probably don't even need to replace, and check the simple things. There's a lot of people out there that they don't know. At this time, I was just assuming, but now I know. Most important, compression test, vacuum, and then go from there. All right, guys. I hope I cleared up some of your investigations of diagnostic troubleshooting your engine, and I hope that this can save you time and money. So I appreciate you watching the video, and I hope that I answered all your questions. All right, thanks guys.